And then there seems like people have settled into certain things, their faith or whatever, in a way that they don't feel as insecure. It's like, okay. And I actually had a conversation with Chad today, and he was saying this is him. It feels like a workshop. Like this whole thing is like it's like a workshop space where we're kind of trying, not necessarily to build one thing, but we're trying to work together.
So I called it a modern day Talmud. So the Talmud is Bible, philosophy, legend, all layered on top of each other. Now, when I learn the Talmud, I'm jumping in to a live conversation going on today and 1,000 years ago. And that allows me to just tap in, and I could discuss with them and argue with them. So this is something that Jews do all around the world. One of its great sages, Rabbi Hillel, there's two famous schools of thought, the Hillelian school of thought and the Shammaian school of thought. And the Hillelian school of thought in their schools would first teach the method of Shammai, steelman it, and only then teach their method. And the attitude was like, we first have to fully understand what the opponent is saying. That was built into how that teaching needs to happen. And then that relates to an argument for heaven's sake, which is like, of course you could argue with me, but just because we want to ultimately get to the truth. And the only way we're going to get that is I fully understand you. And that doesn't mean, and that's why I borrowed this term from a rabbi friend of mine, but I dubbed it like a brave space, right? Which is, it's not the safe space. It's a place where I have to be able to speak my mind and be honest about it. But that doesn't mean, and that has to do with the insecurity he was talking about. So if they see Father Stephen DeYoung giving Jacob Frederici, who call, Baal of Tartus and like, Jesus is horrible. And like, nevertheless, Father Stephen DeYoung, which I guess you could argue is, let's say, a heavy hitter, so to speak, right? So as a Jew, this dude is coming on a 3-hour stream with Jacob, me, Trey, and some other dude. And we're talking about like Jacob's calling him out, but now he sends Jacob the draft of his new book and asks Jacob to please look at it and let him know of any of those thoughts. Think of the amount of security you need to have in that, both from Jacob to look at this and be like, of course I'll give you notes. I love you, Father Stephen DeYoung. At the same time, obviously the 7 pages over here about Jesus is God, I'm not going to comment on that because my answer would be like, it's not relevant, but that's not what you asked for. And you could assume that I'm going to respect it as such. And
did this happen?
I'm sorry?
Did this happen?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he's coming out of his new book. He told Jacob, don't publicize and things like that. But you could look at it. You could give me your comments. But that is the beautiful space. We can't both be Israel. But if we take ourselves seriously, we could see, what does that mean? How does that relationship look? And that goes back to that email I sent you of that. So I were you aware of that, for example?
No, I'm not. I mean, I'm not reading Catholic publications.
Understood, but for the Vatican and what it symbolizes to come and say, hey, you know what? Don't stop trying to convert them. And, it's a mystery, but they have their own right relationship with God. You understand like the amount of pressure that like suddenly gets released when you're like, whoa, okay. Because like that was a completely different conversation for 2,000 years. Now, like that I mean, it's so miraculous. That's why it gives me hope to my relationship with my Muslim brothers, because we're not there yet. But 100 years ago, what if an art like the Vatican saying something like that would have been a complete miracle. So
why can't it be a miracle today?
Yeah. I mean, every day, slowly but surely, we're moving up that mountain. But I think that you have a certain inertia that's being built up, which I hope will start growing naturally. So I'm not going on there is Jewish YouTube, so to speak, right? But this conversation hasn't hit it yet. It's also because it's very controversial to now.
Both on both sides, honestly, bro.
First of all, correct. And I don't know what it's like. It's wrong for me to because this is a very controlled group. You have people from the fringe. So it's not really representative of all Christians. It could be Christian YouTube to be you guys keep on joking around with these Jews online. Like, what's with your deal, right? Like this, like, for them, this something could look like heresy, but there is a sense where again, if you could see Paul having this lovely conversation with Jacob, or even ripping on each other, the viewers feel safe. They feel like that I'm not threatened by this. They're clearly there's something over here. There's love over here. There's a
relationship. That's and that keeps coming back. The idea of a relation, God's relationship to man as being like an absolute, that this is a relationship. That then also we are embodying that as a reality. And if we base things, and I think that was such the modern mistake was still so tribal. We're just going to get up our people and debate, okay, here's our two, and they're just going to go at, as opposed to a relationship. And even it sounds like sometimes people that were having those debates, they actually had pretty good relationships, but then they felt like they had to placate instead of just
Brett and Sam.
What's that?
I said Brett Weinstein and Sam, right?
Yeah.
There was a relationship, yet they find themselves like in opposing sides right now. And I think that's because, right, we say Moses spoke to God face to face, right? But then the continuation of that verse is as seeing his fellow man, right? And the sense was, can you see the image of God? That's where you see it, in your fellow man. Just like we see with Jacob when he hugs Esau, he says, I saw the face of God in you, right? So that's happening. There's a sense of symmetry. I mentioned this in the past, but we have 2 ears and 2 eyes and 2 nostrils and 2 lungs. There's only one heart. And the only time you have symmetry of the heart is if you're hugging someone else, because then you have 2 hearts on either side. And that's the only time that happens, is when you're with someone else. And that's why we have from 2 make 1, right? We create a child and we go back towards that unity. But yes, that is definitely something that we have forgotten, that we're all one, that we're all a community. And unfortunately, Israel was reminded of that in a very harsh way after October 7th. How there was a great unification in the country, but there was a sense where like there's a lot of internal struggle going on over here, and which I also think is very biblical in its own sense. Like I don't think we could really be us until we fully understand who we want to be in Israel, and like that has a lot of political elements and religious elements to it. And again, I think those tensions reverberate to the world out there, and that is what the Jewish nation is also supposed to be. It's proper orientation as an individual, as a family, as a community, as a city, as a body politic, and then that's just for the world to model.
And not only that, but I mean, I feel like that same thing is a core part of Christianity, a core message, and maybe we're sharing that or borrowing that or whatever you want to share. And that for me and my real journey from individual to marriage to family to career to life and now community and the world, like I believe that. I'm trying to live that myself. And I'm guess what it sounds like is I'm trying to join Chezi in that as well. And I think that's pretty cool.
That's what you're being called to do, is very much live in partnership with God. You see this, and there's a stark difference in the Quran. God talks to Adam and then gives Adam the animals' names. Here are the names of the animals. In Judaism and in Christianity, we see God says this crazy verse. He talks to the divine council and says, let's see what this dude's going to name the animals, right? And the sense is God is interested in that partnership with us. He wants that partnership with us. He wants us to create alongside with him. I mentioned in one of my weekly portion reviews how there's the Greek myth of Prometheus, right? He needs to steal fire and bring it down to us. But the Jewish myth is On the seventh day, when the day is coming to an end, Adam starts getting very nervous. This is his first time experiencing night, and he thinks like the world is ending, going back to chaos, so to speak. And then God gives him 2 stones and teaches him how to rub them together. But the sense was it didn't have to be stolen from God like Prometheus, and it's like this forbidden fruit that we're challenging the God in competition. Rather, God gave it to us. However, he didn't just give us fire. He said, work on this. Put in effort, build this together, and you could create something new yourself. But I'm going to do this. I'm doing this together with you. So that call is, we just read the portion of, we just started the book of Leviticus. It starts with, and in Hebrew it's called Vayikra, and he called. And that's the first line. So the commentary on that first line says, that is the eternal call. Before the commandments, before the ordinance and all the 613 mitzvot, first God spoke to Moses out of love, right? And that is the context that all this is happening in. God is eager to have a relationship